It's Doodlebud here. You know, I have this brand new pen that arrived in the mail just the other day. Something that no one has ever seen before, that you don't even know it exists, and there'll be a Kickstarter coming up for it. I thought I'll review it, but I thought, you know what, let's just wait a little bit longer. And I wanted to thank Maya Furlong, who loaned me all of these pens here in this pouch for my recent Lamy Safari breakdown on how to tell a fake. I told her in return I was going to give her a pen. I was going to be the Italic little brass pocket pen. I did a video recently with that one as a thank you. I was going to even grind the nib. But then I looked at the pen for a second, and I just shot the review for this one. And you know what? This is a really nice writing pen. I need to tune the nib a little bit. It's a little bit too tight. But I thought this would be a fantastic candidate for the little kind of cursive italic, what I call crowd pleaser grind. And I thought, what a cool thing to do. I'll give her this pen instead because I just feel it's a better writer, and that grind would suit this pen more. And even better, she can have a video of me tuning and grinding the pen to go with it, just as a thank you for the help on doing all this. So yeah, again, I put a quick poll up. I said I want to tune and grind a pen. Should I video it, or already have enough videos on that? And people are like, yep, do up a video. So here we go. This is for everyone to watch. If you have a pen that you get and it's not writing quite right, it's off a little bit, I'm going to show you some tips, at least what I go through on how to correct that. And then ultimately I'll finish off with a nib grind. So first thing we have to do is do a baseline. So this is before. So here's a quick baseline. Now again, when I go to do a writing sample for a video, sometimes the cap is off a bit and I get set up and then I go to write and then it hard starts because the cap's been off for a moment. But anyway, so this is just before. I got Noodler's Black in here. It had a little trouble here. Once it got going, it runs not too bad. That's a little bit out of the ordinary how much that was skipping, but I find it's just off a little bit. If you push firmer, it's all good. It almost already has a bit of an italic feature to it, just because I find I have to put a little extra pressure on it when it's light, or if you're writing really fast, you can see it skipping a little bit. So if you got a pen that's doing that, let's see what's causing it, and I'll show you how to fix it. But when you do a writing sample, you can just do some light pressure, and then do some firm pressure, and see if that sort of fixes your flow problem. Like, don't go crazy, but just a bit more. And you can see just a little bit here, especially on that G on the light, it just misses a touch every now and then. So that sort of kind of affirms what I was thinking, that the nib gap, the tines here are too close together. But let's check it. Let's do a measurement. So someone just asked me, what's the size I look for in a recent comment. And so that's 0.0015. The inch symbol is gone, but inches, or 1.5 thousandths of an inch. Millimeters, that is 0.038. So Pelican in the factory, if you watch the Appleboom pen video when he tours it, they talk about it. It was 0.4 millimeters, the gap they look for. So I'm just going to thread this in here, and you can see already how much that feeler gauge is flexing to get in there. That means the gap is just a bit too small. It's having trouble getting in there. So yeah, that's too tight, and then you can feel it. It'll slide it along. And it's too tight. It's really grabbing that. So that's way less than 1.5 thousandths of an inch, or, that 0.38, 0.4 millimeter. It's probably almost maybe in one, around a thousandth of an inch, somewhere in there, maybe even a touch tighter. So got to open it up a little bit. I'll show you how it's pretty quick and easy. A good surface to tune this nib on is actually something you already have, a lot of you out there. You need something like a little plastic sheet, and this is just the cover from this Rhodia pad that I got. That's sort of an appropriate thing. So it's on my desk. I could go on the mat. This would probably work. It's a bit too soft. You don't want to do anything too hard, like a tile, or you don't want to do that. But a quick and easy one you can do is just put finger over the top here on the breather hole area. Feel free to put something on your finger if you don't want ink to get on it, and just press down a little. Let's flip the camera angle so you can see just a little. So all we're trying to do is, when you saw me apply a little more pressure, the flow was better. So that just reaffirms a little wider gap will improve the flow. So I'm just holding it there, just gently bouncing it a bit, because what we're trying to do here is, this nib here will have stresses in it from the manufacturing process. So there's forms, it gets forged, well, not quite forged, but it gets pressed into there. There's a form that comes down and forms that nib. And so that process, things get stretched and squished. There's internal stresses, and sometimes those stresses are going to force it to be too tight, especially after the slit is done. It can just spring it back together a bit. So we're just trying to change those forces. So we're just going to go on, apply a little bit of pressure because we want to open those tines a little bit, but moderate pressure. Don't go crazy. And then you can raise it a little bit as well. And we're just trying to redefine the stresses that are in the metal. Tell them, no, don't go there. Here's where you want to be. So it's sort of springy. Focus, you. Let's see where we are now with the feeler gauge. I'm going to slide it in there. That's a lot better already. I can actually come in through the top now without it fighting. It's pretty close. Let me show you if you're having trouble doing it with the nib and feet all in the pen. That would almost be close. I'd probably go one more round of that, and I think it'd be perfect. But if you're having a little trouble with yours, you can't do that, or it's too tight. You got to pop it out. So let me show you. The nib and feet is out, and what you can do, you can check the gap here when it's free flying in the air, and of course the focus is going crazy. Okay, you know, this is much easier to do when I don't have to hit record. I'll tell you that much. Anyway, so we're going to check that gap. And I can feel, yeah, it's still a bit too tight. Now the nib will act differently when it's out in the air like this versus when it's seated in the housing. Again, things fit in there, and just how everything's resting, there can be a little bit of some forces on the side and introduce new stresses into the nib. But if it's really, really tight, and that little method I showed you, you think you're going to go too far, if you have the hand strength, you can grab it on the sides and open that up a little bit. Another option, if that's not working, you got to be careful when you do this one, because you can kind of bend the tipping material over or just really get things out of alignment, is to take the feeler gauges and go up a little bit in size. So we're at the smallest one, well, 1 thou and a half. So let's go up to say the 2.5, maybe the 3/1000 feeler gauge, and just fish this one through. So you start at the breather hole, and then you slide forward a bit, and that is going to open it. Now that won't be enough, because you just open it, it's going to snap back together. That didn't relieve the stresses, or at least I should say change them. So what you go is you can go into the breather hole. Now again, I'm not the biggest fan of this method. Sometimes you got to do what you got to do, but then you can just press on the feeler gauge side to side of it. Now what can happen is the tines can flip over when you're doing that, or you can sort of round it. So it is a technique you got to practice with. Don't do this with an expensive pen for your first go. Go on, you know, eBay's, AliExpress's, whatever. And so I'll hold it, and I'm kind of pulling back here a little bit, trying to open that, and I'll press forward to kind of open it that way. But go on, get a batch of a few nibs. You get them for like $1 a piece. Or if you got a pen you just really don't like and you hate everything about it, well, have some fun with the nib. Mess the nib up. Maybe get it out of alignment, get the gap too tight or whatever. Make it your guinea pig. You'll probably end up liking the pen. And then next time you have an expensive pen, you get a, I don't know, $100, $200-$300 pen, and it needs just a quick little adjustment, little tune-up. Now you know what to do. Okay, so went back and forth a little bit. Let's see what that did to the tying gap. So I'm going to go back to my smaller feeler gauge, slide it in, and see if that feels a little bit better. Yeah, we're almost, you know, I would say we're pretty much bang on there. The one thing where I see a lot of brass sheets going through and you're going quite thick and you're forcing it through, I'm not a fan of that method. That can help a little bit to kind of clean it out and stuff, but as far as opening the tines, I'm just not a big fan of it, because like I said, it's essentially a spring now, because the shape has changed. So you got all these forces that are in here, and they want to go back to where they're sitting right now. So you have to do things to change that. So that's where some pressure, and you hold it for a little bit. You're just trying to reduce those force vectors in it, if we want to be technical. So this nib now appears to be all good. I like that gap. The tines here, I don't know what we can see with the camera. Yeah, okay, you can see that now they are out of alignment. So perfect. Let's get them back into alignment. So all I'm going to do, you can see this one's too low, this is too high. Well, let's just go the other way. Okay, just a little bit. Okay, let's see where we're at. Close, just a little bit more. pretty darn close. I'll check this on my loop, and there we go. And also too, sometimes they'll snap together when they cross back over. I'll check for alignment on there too, because now sometimes what can happen, this is the tipping material, what can happen is sometimes they can get rocked this way or they can get rocked this way. So when you adjust the tines up and down, they can snap over top of each other. So I just check that a bit. I'm not gonna be able to show that in the camera, but you get a loop, and that's where you'll maybe just open it a bit more, do some slight adjustments, and we'll come back and show you where we're at. So I did just open the tying gap there a little bit more, as you could see with the nib out, because what I found is when I was trying to adjust the tipping, as you saw, the tines would kind of snap back and cross over each other, and then what that means is there's just too much stress. They want to be this way, not sitting side by side. So we have to get rid of that stress. So I actually had to open up that gap just a little bit more. And now you can see when I pull the tines up and down, they're not snapping over top of one another. So now the adjustment's much easier. We're not going to have stresses in the nib, in the steel itself. That looks pretty darn close for tine adjustment. The gap, let's check that now with the feeler gauge. It feels even better than it did before. Just a little bit more spot on. I find that 1.5 thousandths of an inch. You can even hear it if you can hear that. It has just a touch of resistance as I pull it through the tines, like it just clears. So that's the feeling we're looking for. I'm going to put it back in the housing and then we'll see if it's still true. The final tune I do is always when it's in the nib holder with the feed, because this is how it's going to be used. Here we are with very light pressure. So just the weight of the pen just gliding across the page. You can see it needs just its own weight to write properly. A pen should be able to do that if it's bang on. Okay, so there we go. You can see this thing doesn't miss a beat now. It's got some nice wetness to it. I know Maya typically kind of likes a medium or broad nib, it seems, and one that's a fairly reasonably wet writer that's nicely balanced. So even if I gave her the pen just like this, she would like it, but she asked me if she could buy one of my little nibs off me in number 6 if I had one around. I said, I'll do you one better. I'll do one for you. So here's the pen. Let's grind it up to, like I said, a sort of a cursive italic, a smooth cursive italic nib that I do, and we'll do the before and after comparison. So I start the process by a combination stone, a 400 grit 1000 combo, 400 to start off with. Now I'm just going to remove the tipping material on the underside of the nib, just trying to get it flat. I'll check it on the loop and go, there we go, it's gone now. So flip the pen over, do the same thing. Remove the ball at the top, leave the tipping material there, but just flatten it out. Back and forth a bit. Now the front, you have to do the same thing. So you're just trying to make it a square, essentially, like a chisel end. So let's have a look and see. So you can see flat on top and bottom and the front. That's the basic geometry. And you want to get that in place with your coarsest stone that you're doing. I'm going to do a quick writing sample, just check line variation. It is pretty darn sharp at this stage. So now it's just about smoothing it out. So I flip the stone over, 1000 grit. Same process, just short strokes. You just let the stone do the cutting for you. And now I just put 2 strokes when I do it this way on the 1000 grit, just knocking those corners off, just to make them a touch rounder. Don't want to do much. Super light pressure. It's just a slight difference. So we're just refining the nib a little bit more. Do a writing sample, it's a little better. And then we just continue with finer grit. So this is 4000 grit, doing the exact same thing as well. I'll do a writing sample, keep an eye on it. I'll write more than this normally, but I just thought I'd do a writing sample to see the progression through the stones, just to see the difference in if we're losing line variation or not, if it's getting a little bit too rounded. So just keeping an eye on it visually and also through the writing too. Again, super light. And now just a couple cross strokes, crisscross, just to break those really sharp corners that are on there. I'll check it again and make sure it's good. This case, yeah, still has a little bite to it, but it has smoothed just a little bit. We haven't really lost too much line variation, and we'll get you close up so you can see it's just a little bit more polished. But we're going to take it further, and I got these micro mesh pads. So I have a 6000, then an 8000, then a 12,000 I'll be using, and you can see here I'm just doing more of those sort of rounding strokes. Again,
super light pressure. You're not really going too hard. Just nice and easy. You just want to get rid of the harshness of the nib onto the 8,000 you see here. Same thing. And finally, the 12,000 micro mesh. I have a whole pack that I get, but these are the main one I use. Now these little strokes, I'm actually putting a little pressure, so I'm opening the tines because you get a sharp edge in the middle of the nib there where the tines separate. There's a little bit of a sharp edge, so I get rid of it there. I check the gap again, sometimes floss it a bit. And I thought it'd be interesting just to see the progression, how the line changes over time. So you can see at the very start, it's a hairline on those cross strokes for the 400 grit, but we don't lose too much by smoothing it. And here's a close-up, best I could with my little microscope, just to give an idea. It's not perfect, but, you know, not too bad for homegrown. If I'm not recording this, this takes maybe, I don't know, 10, maybe 15 minutes max. So just doing the writing sample for a comparison. I'm also just feeling if I need to tweak it just a little bit. This is pretty good. I might just refine a couple little spots if I find any, if there's a bit of a bite to it. I like to check the writing. I like to check the cursive, the upstrokes, downstrokes, crisscrosses, overs. So yeah, don't be afraid to just take your time and play around with it. Sometimes even just on the paper, it'll smooth things out a little bit. I flushed the pen, inked it with some Pelikan Royal Blue. I'm actually going to give Maya the pen like this. By the time you see this video, she actually already got the pen. She tried it out, and she was actually super happy with it. She really liked how it wrote. So I was happy that she enjoyed the pen, and it's something different than what she has. She was actually looking for something with line variation, but not as wide as, say, a 1.1 stub. So I think she enjoyed it. Mango chutney, great way to final check the pen. You just hit strokes in all the different ways, how the strokes connect and they loop. So that's kind of like a final test, just a little bit of printing in a mango chutney to see if it needs any more tuning.
Okay, so here we go. This is the old and this is the new. So you can see the difference there with those thin cross strokes, thicker down strokes. And it, yeah, it just gives you the writing a nice little flair. Makes it look kind of cool. It's not as smooth as a stub. It does have a little bit of bite to it to get those thinner lines, but it's still got some smoothness to it. Messed up my mango chutney there. Don't know what I was doing. Get nervous in front of the camera. But yeah, big thank you to Maya for hooking me up with those Lamy Safaris, the real deals and the fakers, so I could do my video. And one quick little tip in case you didn't know, instead of having the nib like this or like this, you can turn it like this ways, and then you have sort of a, I guess, a poor man's architect nib. So there we go. That's all I have for today. Hope you found some of that useful. I understand not everyone's going to be grinding a nib. I'm not telling you to. I'm not responsible if you screw something up. It's not uncommon for a nib to need a little adjustment in the gap, or the tines could be off a touch. And sometimes, honestly, 30 seconds is what you need and your pen's right the way you want it. Make sure that the nib is set up nicely before you get your grind on. You don't want any additional stresses and stuff like that that can come out over the nibs. Sorry, if the tines are out of alignment, the gap is wrong. Fix that first and then just give her. Hope that helps. Thanks for watching as always, and check the description for any details and stuff like that. We'll catch you next time.